Good evening. Thanks for joining us on this beautiful September evening. I'm Mike McInally, editor of the Missoulian. We're here tonight in what actually used to be the Missoulian's press room back when we were in this old building some 15 or 20 years ago. Nowadays it's MCAT Studio. I'm here for the first of 3 live City Council forums. Joining me for this half hour are 2 candidates for Ward 3. Over here on my left is Bob Luceno. On my right, the incumbent, Luann Crowley. Thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. Let's start with you, if you don't mind. Luann, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got involved in city politics. What made you want to run for another term?
Okay. Background-wise, I have a degree in elementary education. I've done some social work. And then I found I didn't really want to stay on the straight and narrow, so I did a number of things. I've waitressed, and when I moved to Montana, I became involved in starting the hospice here, which was a way of kind of coming to grips with my father's death. I had come through traveling, and my brother was looking for a place to go to school for his master's, and I suggested Missoula, and he came through, and that's kind of how I came out. I moved in with them, taught at Sussex School for a while, got involved with the hospice, and then did something a little different. I discovered macrobiotics and eventually opened my own little macrobiotic restaurant and teaching facility. After that, after a couple of breaks, I then started working at Adventure Cycling. And through that association, became interested in transportation. And while I was wandering around in my life, I saw something in the paper that Christian Gorelli put there that said she wanted to start a neighborhood association in the Slant Street area. And for whatever reason, I was excited by that, so I became involved in our neighborhood association and worked at that for 3 years. And when Marilyn Craig decided to move and leave the district, Chris asked me if I would be interested. And I initially was not overjoyed because I was a little nervous about that. It's a big step. But since Marilyn took 5 months, I got up enough courage and went through the application process and eventually was appointed.
Okay.
And now the reason I guess I'm hooked. What I see is Missoula going through such a tremendous change. And when it goes through that transition, it comes out the other side, I want it to still feel like Missoula. And I feel like I have the energy, and I'm worked up enough about the changes, I'd say, to want to put the time in. Listen to the speeches, do all that. And I'll tell you something, when you get to be the voice for people, and you connect with the issues that they're interested in, and you get to vote, and feel like you're speaking for a group of people, it's quite an honor. It's a very humbling experience.
Okay.
And I enjoy it.
Before I forget to ask this, what are the boundaries of Ward 3?
Well, we just went through redistricting. So now we start, on the south end, we start at the north side of North Avenue. We work our way all the way up to 4th Street. This is along Higgins. And then you branch out and you go over to the university, and you go up to Stevens Avenue. Does that give you a pretty good idea?
Okay. The same question back to you, Bob. You had served on the city council before, so you have some experience there. What's your background, and why on earth are you interested in trying to get another term on the council?
Well, Mike, yes, I was on the city council for 2 years, and like my opponent, Luann, I was appointed to finish the term of an existing council person. In my case, it was Dan Kemmis, who successfully won his first mayoral election. And I was among, I think it was about 7 or 9 interviewees, and I was appointed by a vote of 9-3 to serve on the council from 1989 through the end of '91. My background here in Missoula is that I've been a resident in Ward 3 for 19 years. Pretty much ever since I moved to Missoula, I have lived in this ward. I have been involved in the business community in different capacities for most of those years, for all of those years, really. The initial year I was in I worked for a distributor for Digital Equipment Corporation. And then the subsequent 15 years, I was in the insulation contracting business and had my own business and was a business owner for 10 years. And most recently, I work for a company called Liberty Northwest.
Okay.
And I'm involved in marketing workers' compensation insurance. I live on Brook Street, right in the heart of the city. I've lived in the Slant Street area pretty much this whole time. Love the neighborhood, love the area, and I love the city. I care deeply about the city, and this is why I'm willing to throw my hat in the ring. My academic background is from one of the top 3 business schools in the country. It's now a university called Rider University near Princeton, New Jersey,
Okay.
and have a degree in economics.
Okay. As you go door to door and campaign in this race, and I know you're both out working early, even though both of you will advance to the general election in November. What are the issues that seem to be on the minds of people in wards, and what can you, as a city council person, do about those issues?
Well, you know, Mike, Ward 3 is predominantly a residential ward, and I've been hearing a number of things as I've walked the ward. In my 91 race, I walked the entire ward. I know every street, I know every home, just about, not every family personally, but I know the ward very well. And being dominated by residences and not a heck of a lot of business in our ward in terms of the way it's laid out, I'm hearing a lot of concerns about money and taxation and representation. I'm hearing concerns from single people, for instance, who are very concerned about things like losing on-street parking due to the change in the definition of family that the city council took recently. I heard from a single woman in her 30s who's lived on 5th Street for many years, and she says, you know, Bob, I can't hardly find a parking place anymore. And I'm really concerned that I'm going to have to leave the street that I've grown to love so much, because the rents continue to go up, and as landlords see that they can have 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 renters in the same structure, their rents are going up further, and I frankly don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to afford living here. And so this was an interesting dialogue, because she had strong feelings on that subject. But generally, I find that when people, especially people who own their homes, I think, you know, what hits home the most is this is their life investment. This is one of the biggest investments we ever make if we own a home. And people are very concerned about some of the direction that the council has taken with respect to housing issues. And then on the other side of the coin, renters are very concerned. And I rented for quite a while, and I know what it's like to rent. And I know what it's like to feel a bit helpless in terms of the marketplace shaping what those rents are going to be. But I'm hearing a lot of concerns about the basics, the essentials, money, and quality of life in my neighborhood, in my house. Concrete things like noise and my pocketbook, and does my elected representative understand my concerns as a homeowner or as a renter? And do they understand that I've lived here for 30 years or 40 years, and I don't really want so much urban infill in my neighborhood that it will impact me in negative ways? I personally think that good intentions influence a society, but I also think that economics drives societies. And we can talk more about that later if you want.
Same question over to you. What are people telling you as you campaign and go door to door?
Well, some of the same things that Bob has mentioned. I think what people are grasping is that the impacts they feel, such as traffic and speed and noise, are coming from this growth that we're all experiencing. So they're aware that they are part of a bigger picture. But when it gets right down to it, what happens to them at night when everybody else leaves town and the house that's rented to some folks, more folks than you'd think belong in there, have a party or something, they want to know what to be able to do about that. And when somebody comes down their alley speeding because they're trying to make a break and not have to deal with traffic on Brooks, they're concerned about that because that impacts them greatly. Some people have been hit out in their alley. Bob mentioned the family definition. Well, that was done in 1996, and actually the people in Ward 3 have been trying to get that back in as a focus on the council since then. But what's happened is that the administration has come out with something called Citizen Guide to Municipal Codes. And there's also something from Myrt on how to be a good neighbor. And what we're trying to do in the interim before we come up with something to replace the family definition is look at a way of giving people power in their lives so they don't feel powerless. And this addresses all the codes, for instance, the landscaping, junk cars. I mean, this is what I've heard. Noise, parking on city streets, things like that. So that they have a way to at least alleviate the problem for now.
Okay. What would be your priorities? What have been your priorities on the council? What would be your priorities in a new term?
Well, I think this growth is what's driving everything else. And so I think planning is the key. Planning and focusing on keeping neighborhoods intact. And when we're talking about planning, there has been a growth management task force, and they've been working on this issue for 3 years. And they are in the process of issuing the results of this study to the public for public comment, and that will be coming up soon.
Yeah, very soon, this week.
Right. And they have invested in what they call these 10 tools that try to address and manage the growth that we are going to be experiencing.
We'll come back to growth management in a little bit. I wanted to turn that question back to you. What would be your priorities on the council?
Well, Mike, I think it takes, and I think perhaps Luann would agree with me. In my case, I was on the council for 24 months, 2 years, and it takes about that long to understand the intricacies of how this city works, and in terms of developing rapport with city staff, paid professional city staff, understanding the taxing mechanisms and all the things that make a city work. And so when I was on the council before, I guess my concerns at that time, and they still are, that Missoula is a place that has always been growing. I have always recognized that. You know, we talk about growth now as though it's something new almost, but in fact, Missoula's been growing since Mr. Warden set up the Hellgate trading post. Certainly we have spurts, and we've had a real aggressive spurt since 1989 that perhaps might be softening up a bit now, if housing is any indication in terms of prices and what I'm hearing from realtors. But my focus and my priority is simply this. We have a representative government in Missoula, and I really like our form of local government. I like that citizens have an opportunity to have an elected person from their neighborhood, from their ward, listen to them, be their mouthpiece, and then also make decisions that are in the best interest of Missoula as well. And my reasons for running are these, and they're quite simple. I don't feel that the Missoula City Council adequately at this time represents all of Missoula. Missoula is a complex, diverse, interesting place that can be fractious, and for that reason the City Council can be that way. I don't think the City Council has always been a smooth place to work because of who we are in our community profile. But right now I think that Missoula deserves, and all the citizens of Missoula deserve, to be heard and represented as proportionately as possible. And so my concerns, back to your initial question, are simply that I would do my part to ensure that Missoula would be and continue to be a wonderful place to live and work in the same place, and to raise a family if one is raising a family, or to live as a single person or whatever. It's the quality of life that's attracted all of us here. And in any given time, in any given room, in any given group in Missoula, if we take a show of hands, usually the majority of those hands are folks who have moved here because they have or had a dream to follow. And so my focus is back to basics. Let's have a city council who treats one another with respect, who can work together, although there may be different points of view. And I like a board that has different points of view. You get spicy discussions and you get intelligent decisions, I think. But when a council regresses where there's this camp and that camp, and where citizens come to a public hearing, as with the Mansion Heights initial vote, and felt ignored and felt that their concerns weren't heard, I think we need to listen again, and we need to listen to the people. And so I'm so thankful that you've put this forum on, and Jeffrey Smith has, to give Luann and I a chance to talk about some of these issues.
Okay. Let's talk specifically a little bit about growth management. As Luann was mentioning, the Growth Management Task Force has been laboring now for years and is beginning to roll out some of the tools that the task force believes are good tools to manage growth. What are your thoughts on growth management? Are these tools the right tools, or what's the best approach?
Yeah,
to
I
manage
think
growth?
we're certainly headed in the right direction. I'm real glad that we have a growth management task force. I'm glad we have people that have been doing some hard work. You know, if you look at the development, and if you look at how American cities have developed in the last 300 years, from my own vantage point, it seems to me that cities have grown and have been designed to respond to the marketplace, to respond to the choices that citizens wanted with respect to the mode of transportation that was at that time. And so I would want our local government to be a government that would respect the choices of the marketplace, that would not want to re-engineer the marketplace, that would not want to dictate to the marketplace or to citizens how they think they should live, but rather that they would realize that, you know, we are in the 1990s, and for instance, the automobile is not going to go away. And 9 out of 10 Missoulians probably do go to work in their cars. And so my focus is infrastructure. It's essential city services. Cities have a responsibility to maintain what we have and to thoughtfully plan ahead so that our infrastructure will always be adequate to serve not only where we are now as a city, but where we're going. And let's face it, whether we're an individual, a family, or a city, or a state, we all have a budget, don't we? We all have a limited amount of money with unlimited wants and needs, and that's all economics is. And so what system is the best system for Missoula to satisfy our many different wants, but, you know, in a time of constraining budgets and less help coming from perhaps the state government, for instance, and having guidelines placed on us by House Bill 195 from the last legislative session, it's really critical that we remember the basics.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you might have some doubts then about some of the key growth management tools, the urban services boundary, the impact fees on developers. Do you have some concerns or doubts?
Well, I just wanted to answer some of the things that Bob was talking about, because I think that's where we differ. You know, growth, if you think of it like a river is going to just go wherever it wants to go. And if you want to see the river go someplace, you have to channel it. And I get the impression from Bob that he just thinks that we ought to just let that growth happen where it will. I think we're smarter than that, because let's face it, nature doesn't grow like that. Nature doesn't grow a foot and then grow a leg to get there, like you might have to do if we had growth in Miller Creek and then we had to bring the infrastructure out there. I also think that people realize that it is the 90s, so we are going to be, if you start looking 20 years ahead, we have to start thinking about being different people. And this whole idea that giving cars precedence, what I like to think of it as is you put everybody on an equal footing. There are a number of ways to get around town, and I think all of us use them. And if we instead of talking about alternative transportation, I just like to think of them as different modes of transportation that suit our needs at different times. That's why I think the City Council, excuse me, in its own way has tried to be responsive to the fact that people want growth that makes sense. That, you know, the way developers have land right now is kind of patch quilt. But in this planning process, we're trying to identify places where it makes sense to grow. For instance, the mayor of our sister city from New Zealand was here. He said they did a whole plan where they looked at their resources, their agricultural land, how they wanted to get around, and they made a plan. They had lots of public input. And then they decided where they wanted to grow, and it was the people who decided, not the developers, not a certain philosophy. And so they set aside places for the agriculture, for the open space. I think that's real important.
Time's moving quicker than
Yes,
I
I
figured.
know.
Assess the council's performance. What do you think? Oh, what do you think the council has done well? What needs improvement? You hear people complain, or you have a lot in this campaign, about the notion of micromanagement. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
How would you address that?
Well, it depends on where you're looking. So, for instance, I'll take the example of looking at subdivisions. It may appear that we're micromanaging, but again, we are in transition. We are operating off old subdivision and zoning regulations. We are trying to move towards something, a way that Missoula can feel like Missoula and yet incorporate all this growth. So, for instance, when you come to things like lighting plans and drainage and landscaping, you know, for instance, when we worked on Albertsons, we spent a lot of time with those folks, and we found them to be cooperative, and we were able to work out things together so that you incorporate commercial, residential, that you have an aesthetic feel to something. And that's what we want to do, and that's what we have instilled in the staff, you might say. But those things aren't on the books. And so in order for me to feel comfortable, I mean, there's a natural tension between the people who want to develop and the people who have to live with it and the people who have to govern. And we have different motives. Those folks have a bottom line they have to meet. We're more interested in seeing the growth come, but we have to protect public health and safety, and we want it to be a nice place to live. So that's why we're in there working with them. It does seem sometimes like we are micromanaging, and maybe we are, but we're also creating policy that has to go to the planning board. Then we can let it go. Then it's policy. But for now, I think we have to be in there fighting.
Okay. Are there things that frustrate you about council and the council's performance? Things that you would work to change in another term?
Well, I think it's just up to each individual council member to figure out what they have to learn, how they have to get along. These are the most intriguing relationships you'll ever have with anyone, because at one point you'll be on the side of someone you don't necessarily agree with. And yet the next day you'll be going, like this. So these people are very dedicated, but some people come, all of us come with a certain amount of agenda that we have to either try to push or learn to compromise. And many of us, there are 6 new people on there, I mean, that have had a year or so to grow. And I think it could be a great council.
Well, what do you think? How would you assess
Well,
the performance of the council?
First of all, I want to come back to something Luann said. She mentioned earlier that she has the impression that I would be willing to let development happen where it will. I really want to straighten something out if I can right now. When I was on the council, I voted against, or I should say I was very outspokenly against, a subdivision in the Upper Rattlesnake on Smoke Elser's land. And I was a contractor, by the way, being outspokenly against the concept of having houses under high tension wires. I think the jury's still out on electromagnetic fields, and I spoke against it. So I think it might be easy to try and pigeonhole me, perhaps as so laissez-faire and so sympathetic to business, for instance, or the choices of people, that I would be for unrestricted growth. But that is simply not true. And my record shows it. When I was on the council, I see myself as a moderate, and if on the council, I would be a very good listener, and I would be very careful in my votes to recognize that as human beings, sometimes we let our selfish nature run ahead of what's in the best interests of people. I think we all have that in common. On the other side of it, I would be very careful to want to see and want Missoula to be developed in terms of its best interest. And so what I'm saying is that I have the capacity to vote against a subdivision as much as vote for one. And in terms of growth in general, Luann mentioned earlier that we're in a period of transition, and I want Missoula to be and look the same as it did. I'm paraphrasing, maybe not an exact quote, but I want it to be similar as the way it was when we get out the other side. I don't think we ever will get out the other side. Communities are always growing. They're dynamic, and we never fully come out the other side when it comes to the growth of a valley or a city. And so I think that it's important for Ward 3 residents especially to know that I see myself as a moderate voice, and I see myself as one that is sympathetic to citizens and to business. I certainly don't see business as the evil empire or business people. And I would be sympathetic as well to what's in the best interest of Missoula, recognizing that perhaps some developments need to be planned a little differently or need to be looked at in terms of their impacts.
Okay. Talk quickly about the performance of the council as you see it now.
Well, I spoke with a council member just last week who told me that he's felt that the council has never talked more and accomplished less than the most recent council. And he's on the council. So what does that tell you, Mike?
What it tells me is that we are in a transition, and things are not black and white anymore. And that this is a period, it may not be comfortable, but this is a period where maybe we do have to talk things over and get stuff out on the table that hasn't been out on the table. I know it's easy to be impatient. It's easy to say, why don't we just get in there, make a decision? Well, there's a lot at stake. And I'm not necessarily saying that I want Missoula to look, it can never look that way. But what we're trying to do is shape the direction it's growing. It's growing and going. You know, as it grows, we want to shape that direction so that it can accommodate growth and yet still have that sense of community. And that includes organizations, business. I mean, we're all a part of this.
Okay. Now we're down to 2 minutes. For a minute, talk about what distinguishes you from Luann, and then you'll have the last word.
Well, you know, ultimately, I'd really like the voters to make that distinction. An old friend of mine, next to my mother, he probably knows me the best, dropped in on me yesterday, visiting from the East Coast. And I said to him, this was his first day in Missoula, and we went down to Caris Park, and we were listening to the music. And I said, Paul, what do you think about this town? He said, you know, Bob, this town seems to have what our town had in the 1950s and 60s when we were growing up. I said, what's that, Paul? And he said, a sense of community. I said, and that's what drew me here. And this is what I would like to see continue. I just love this place, and I love the people here. My involvement, just looking at on my brochure, my card, my flyer, tells people in the ward that my background and my involvement, commitment to Missoula is broad, and it's deep, from the arts to business to raising a family, and so on. And so I really would prefer to let the voters of Ward 3 analyze and critique, and we'll see on Election Day.
Okay. Well, back to you.
Well, I'd like to let people know that I too have been here for almost 20 years, and I have, this is where I have lived, and this is where I want to live, and that's why I feel committed to being involved. I happen to think that we're under a little bit more tension, perhaps, than Bob does. I think we're at a crossroads. I think the stakes are high, and I want Missoula to continue with her integrity and her charm and her dignity in place, so that as she grows, she still remains a wonderful city.
Okay. Thank you. Both these candidates are on the ballot in the Tuesday primary election. Both of them advanced to the November election. Encourage you to vote. Thank you both for coming out.
Thanks,
tonight.
Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Mike's are down, music's up.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
See what you lost when you left this world. This sweet old world. See what you lost when you left this world. This sweet old world. The breath from your old lips, the touch of fingertips, a sweet and tender kiss. what you lost when you left this world. This sweet old world. What you lost when you left this world. This sweet old world. Million of us in love, promises made good. You're all flesh and blood, looking for some truth, dancing with no shoes, beat the rhythm of blues. The pounding of your heartstone, together with another one. Didn't you think anyone loved you? See what you lost when you left this world. This sweet old world. See what you lost when you left this world. This sweet old world. See what you lost when you left this world. This sweet old world. See what you lost when you left this world. This sweet old world.
Okay. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we have with us the candidates from Ward 4 who are both on the ballot in Tuesday's primary election. Both these candidates also, like the candidates from Ward 3, will advance to the general election in November. On my right is Paula Hofman.
Hi.
On my left is Myrt Charney. Thanks
Hi, Mike.
for joining me on this beautiful September evening.
It's us that's supposed to be nervous, not you.
Paul, let me start with you. Talk a little bit about your background and how you got involved in city politics and what has possessed you to run for the council.
Okay. Actually, I never was really involved in politics too much until I came to Missoula. And Missoula has such interesting politics that it was a great spectator sport for me. I've worked at the YWCA for the past 7 years, and in my job there, I had to be aware of federal, state, and local politics, policies that were being made, and so I was, and it just became more and more interesting. I started watching the city council meetings on MCAT, and I enjoyed that. Got to know several people on the city council and around the city government, and county government through my work at the Y, and then when Doug Harrison decided not to run, I thought, aha, here is my opportunity. People had said, oh, well, why don't you run? And I was kind of like, politics is not my bag as far as being directly involved. But I felt like I wasn't being represented in my ward. And so I have been taught through various lessons in Girl Scouting and at the Y that when you want change, well, you go out and you affect change if you can. And so I talked to several people. They said, go for it. And so I filed.
Okay. Over to you, Myrt. Tell us a little about your background and why you're running this year for the council.
Well, I've been in politics for about 30 years now. It was 1967, 30 years ago. This month, as a matter of fact, that I was sworn in as mayor of Juneau, Alaska. And that was after an 18-year highway department experience, 14 years with the state of Minnesota and 4 years with the Alaska Department of Highways. And we had a change of governors, and I found out that he wanted his own person. And so I was terminated and decided to run for mayor of Juneau and was elected. Since that time, I've held a lot of political appointed positions, including state budget director for the state of Alaska and director of the Alaska Legislative Affairs Agency for 9 years prior to my retirement. And I've been in Missoula for a little over 4 years now. 2 years ago, I ran for the city council for the same ward and lost to Larry Anderson. It was an open seat at the time. Again, I wasn't planning on running this time until Doug Harrison said that he was not going to run. And I got called up to go to lunch, and there was Doug Harrison and Larry Anderson, my opponent from 2 years ago, as well as Jack Reedy and Al Sampson. And the four of them asked me to run this time. And so I said, okay, I'll need some help because I threw all my stuff away from 2 years ago. But so I'm making another run at it.
Okay. What are the issues that seem to be on the voters' minds in Ward 4? And what do you think you could do about them if you get elected to the council?
I think the council in representing Ward 4 has been represented well by Bob Hermes and Doug Harrison and now Larry Anderson. I can't think of very many votes that I would have voted opposite. Probably for the acting mayor position, they voted for Doug Harrison, Larry Anderson did, and I probably would have voted for Al Sampson. And outside of that, I think they represented Ward 4 on practically all the issues very well, and I probably wouldn't have changed my vote on the issues that have gone by. What I see as Ward 4 voters wanting is common sense government, especially 2 years ago, or last year, the voters of Missoula and Ward 4 approved a nonpartisan council. They've had enough of the politicking, and that's why I was happy that 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats asked me to run, because I really want to be a nonpartisan city council person. I don't have any fixed agenda. I think the people want common sense. I'm willing to listen to the people and represent Ward 4 as they want me to represent them.
Paula, what issues stand out for you as you go and campaign among the houses of Ward 4? What are people telling you there?
Well, as I've been going door to door, and I've knocked on over 1,000 doors already, and I don't know how many people I've talked to. I haven't exactly counted that many, but several hundred by now. I hear people saying that they want Missoula to retain its flavor. Like, I think just about every city council candidate has said that. They're for that, and they are concerned about traffic. They're concerned about crime. They're concerned about open space. They want to have open space down on the flats. What I can propose to do about that is listen to those constituents. You know, I'm having more fun going door to door. I never would have believed I would have had so much fun, but I've met a lot of wonderful people. People, even, you know, the people that disagree with me, the people that agree with me, I don't really care. I just enjoy talking to them and listening to what they have to say. So I think the people have the solutions in mind, and that's why I like to talk to them, because they have some really good solutions. I don't have all the solutions. I'm just, you know, one person. I have one sort of like, I see the world from my point of view, but when I see it from other people's points of view, then I have a broader perspective, and I think then can make better judgments on what they want and vote in kind.
Okay. What would be your priorities if you were elected to the council?
Well, like everyone else, I think we need some growth management planning, and the growth management task force has been off to a good start. But you know, there's a lot of things to go. There's just this one piece of it. This is 1/3 of the plan that they are submitting to the public. There's a lot of work to do, and I want to be a part of that. I don't know all the issues, you know, even though I have been watching City Council for a while. I haven't studied it in, you know, to the depth to which when I'm elected, I'll certainly know. But there are, that's my priority, I think, is that growth management, and let's hear what the people want, and then go ahead with that. But we don't want to just grow and then suffer the consequences, and that's what I'm hearing.
Okay. We'll come back a little later and talk about growth management. I hope. What would be your priorities if you win a seat on the council?
I think that my top priority would be the essential services for the city. The fire department, the police department, the street maintenance, the essential services the city must provide, infrastructure. Our greatest asset, Missoula, I think, are the people of Missoula. And they have to be provided the services and the safety and the health that they deserve. The second asset I think we have, the greatest asset we have in this community, is the business community that provides the jobs and the economic base for the citizens that I talked about as our first asset. And so that we can't be a hindrance to the business community, because they have to succeed if people are to have jobs in this community in order for Missoula to continue to be. Missoula and all cities either grow or they die. And for Missoula to grow as it has, it cannot have a reverse project that puts hindrances on the people or on the business community.
Okay. Well, if you're watching the last half hour, and I suspect you probably were, you know that the Growth Management Task Force is rolling out some of its work and some of its key tools that it sees as being essential to manage growth, include items such as impact fees for developers, urban services boundary. Are we going about managing growth the right way?
Well, I'm glad they're studying this. I'll be interested to hear what the public has to say about it. I'm not going in with any foregone conclusion. Philosophically, I would probably be in favor of some sort of impact fees. Probably be against drawing any lines around urban center. I think that's too much restriction on the people. Missoula has been growing over the years. People have bought property where they want to buy. Another important thing that the citizens of Missoula voted in last year was the neighborhood councils. And I look forward to the establishment of those neighborhood councils and listening to the people from the various neighborhoods telling the council what they want. So any fixed agenda that I have on growth management, I'll listen. I'll listen to people, hear what they have to say during the public hearings on this. I'm glad it's going forward. We do need the comprehensive plan, there's no question about it. To what extent, I'm going to listen to the people.
Okay. Paula, do you think the city's going about growth management in the correct manner? You've been watching the work of the task force for a while, I would imagine.
Yeah, I do, because they are getting input from the people. You know, there was a committee composed of many facets of the community that put this task force together, and now it's going to the people for their input, and that's what's important. Is the people get the city that they want.
Okay. Now, you've watched the council on MCAT for years, if I understand your answer correctly. What does the council do well? What are the areas that need some improvement? And three, I guess you don't have to answer this question, but how would you rate the MCAT coverage of those city council meetings?
Well, let me answer the last question
Okay.
first so I don't neglect it. I am so appreciative of MCAT for covering city council meetings and other meetings. I worked at public access back in Fort Worth, so I'm familiar with what public access has to offer, and don't know if I ought to say this on the air, but one of the reasons, major reasons I have cable is to watch MCAT. I can't get it any other way. And so, you know, I really do appreciate that. Now the city council. Well, I think the city council, what do they do well, and what do they need work on? What I love about the city council and about Missoula is the diversity, the diverse opinions, the debate. You know, the yin with the yang, the tension. We need that tension. We need the debate. We need to hear all facets, and then we can work to a common solution that people agree with. If we can hear all the diverse opinions, it's when we don't hear the diverse opinions, and then somebody goes off disgruntled because they weren't able to tell what their opinion was, and so they don't feel heard. That's when we get into trouble. I'm kind of at a loss, not that the city council is perfect, but I'm kind of at a loss as to what I would improve or how I would go about improving it. It's so complex. Yeah, they nitpick everything to death, but do we want any less? And as some folks have said, we're in a transitionary period. We don't have concrete rules for developers. We need to put those things in place so the city council doesn't have to. I've heard council members say, I'm so frustrated with this process, I could just spit, you know, and people from all viewpoints are, you know, on the council are frustrated with some of the process that's going on. But maybe we have to get where we're going.
Okay. Well, I want to talk in more detail about that whole micromanaging question a little bit later. But I want to toss the question back over to your way. And again, you don't have to answer the MCAT portion, but what do you think the council does well now? What are the things that frustrate you about watching the council perform?
I'm glad to answer the MCAT question, although I'm unlike my opponent. I don't get MCAT on a satellite dish. I do not subscribe to the cable company, but I've appeared on MCAT in the past, as well as when I've testified at city council meetings and during the Charter Commission hearings that they held. The city council right now, I think, does too much micromanaging. I think that's its biggest fault, and you said you'd get into that later. The greatest one of the greatest burdens and responsibilities of the city council is to establish the annual budget, the annual appropriation. And I think that's one place where they have failed to exercise their responsibility, in that I think they've abdicated a lot of their authority in the budget making process to the mayor. And the mayor's budget is what they work from. They don't get to listen, I don't think, to as much as possible to the department heads, the program managers, and I think the mayor has his own, the previous mayor as well as the current mayor and the current budget, play some favoritism, I think, and the council just kind of accepted what the mayor proposed. And I know there was a beefing up of the mayor's office prior year under the previous mayor, and again, the council pretty much rubber stamped the mayor's budget. And there are some definite needs in the city, the police department, the fire department, and I think they're being overlooked. And so I think that's the greatest problem with the city council, is not taking the authority that they have in establishing the annual appropriations and doing a more active role in creating the budget.
Okay, so this is not an area where you see the council micromanaging then.
No, they want to get into all kinds of other things, and but the budget, I don't know what it is. Maybe they're just not budget people. I happen to be a budget person. As I said, I was a state budget director for 4 years in the state of Alaska, and I know how important the budget is. Now the mayor's talking, current mayor now is talking about a zero-based budgeting in some areas for next year. Well, zero-based budgeting was a coined phrase, came out of the early 1970s and out of state of Georgia, matter of fact. It was a consulting firm, Management Analysis Corporation, that was hired by then Governor Carter to revise the state of Georgia's budgeting system, and they came up with what they called zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting had its day for maybe about 4 or 5 years, and it's passé today. Program budgeting and performance budgeting is things today. And so for the city department heads to have to go through a zero-based budgeting process next year is, it's crazy. You're not going to zero out the police department. You're not going to zero out the fire department. You're not going to zero out street maintenance in the city. So why should they have to go through the exercise of establishing a zero-based budget? I just think it's asinine, and we've got to do a better job in the budgeting area.
Now you said in some areas you think the council is micromanaging. Why do you
Right.
think that is, and how would you get the council away from doing that if you were elected?
Well, I think there's probably too many members of the city council now that have a foregone agenda, and that there are certain things when they were elected that they wanted to accomplish in the city without regard to the people, what the people want, and not listening to the people. And that Mansion Heights up there in my ward is a great example of that, especially when you can't say anything about what happened prior in the 80s when that subdivision was previously approved, but here you have a developer that came in with the revised plan and reduced development, more open space land, and the city council, I think a lot of them because they're anti-growth, refused the alternate plan and by doing that went with the original plan, which would develop that whole hillside out there. Only through the hardness, I think, of the developer, who then agreed to negotiate. The city council negotiated on the day of his wife's funeral, and refused to postpone the meeting. So from his wife's funeral, he had to come to the meeting, negotiating meeting, and But he still negotiated and was willing to accept again another reduced plan. And so, by the city council taking the original action, it was only through the goodness of the developer that that vote happened to come out okay for them. But you know, that's some of the micromanaging that I think they're doing. You know, they're nitpicking about on the Eagle Hardware development, about how many bushes and so forth are in landscaping of the area is going to be. Wow, you know, if they've got nothing better to spend their time about arguing number of bushes and trees that got to be put in a development, and you know that there's some secret agenda that they have going in if they're just making up excuses.
Let me turn the question over to Paula. Is it too much nitpicking? Is some of that called for? What do you think? Is it a case of micromanaging out of control, or is some of that, do you believe, necessary for what the council is trying to do?
Well, I think until we get a plan in place, that some of this is really necessary. One of the Mansion Heights debates, and I was at all of those meetings, I think all of them, but a great majority of them, they're with the Plan B and the Plan C. One of the debates was boulevards and streets and how to arrange that. Well, I live up on Whitaker, and I know how much snow gets plowed onto my sidewalk after I have after I have already shoveled, and you know, some of that stuff is necessary, you know, and the fire marshal asking for sprinkler systems in all those houses because the fire marshal didn't think he could get his trucks up there in the winter. You know, some of that is necessary for our safety and health. Yeah.
Okay, we're down to just a couple of minutes. Talk briefly about what makes you the better candidate, you think. What distinguishes you from Myrt?
Oh, they always ask us that. And I too want to decline that, to answer that. You know, I think the people will decide who they want to vote for, who best represents their ideology, who thinks they will which candidate will best represent them. And I've just been really grateful for the support I've gotten from so many people. Thanks.
Okay. Over to you. What distinguishes you from Paula in this race?
Oh, I don't know if I want to get into that either, but I'm asking the people for if they want a common sense approach to local government and a conservative local government that will provide the essential services that they need. And I'm asking for the vote of the people of Ward 4. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, Mike.
Well, thank you both for coming. Myrt Charney, Paula Hofman are on the ballot in Tuesday's primary election. They both advanced to November's general election. Thank you both for coming. We'll be back in a couple of minutes with candidates from Ward 2.
Thank you, Paula.
We're back. If you've been watching us, if you're just joining us, we have the Ward 2 candidates. Again, these candidates will be on the ballot in the primary election on Tuesday. Both of them will also advance to the general election in November. On my left is the incumbent, Linda Tracy. On my right, Jamie Carpenter. Thank you both for coming tonight to talk about the issues and why you're running for the City Council. Linda, let's start with you. Talk a little bit about your background and how you got interested in city politics and what prompted the initial run for the City Council and why you're going for another term.
Well, I moved here 7 years ago to marry someone who was from here, and I had had the chance to live in a lot of different places around the United States and in other countries. And when I moved to Missoula, I instantly fell in love with this place, and at the same time I recognized some of the signals of some change. And that was at a time when we were just beginning to have a great building boom. And I recognized that we had not put into place some of the plans that would help us continue to have the quality of life that we now enjoy, that would help us continue to have a there here, to have a sense of Missoula. And so I would find myself watching the city council meetings on television on Monday nights, doing the same thing here that my dad does at home when he watches the football games, which is propelled out of my seat, gesticulating, talking to the television, saying, "No, where are the important questions?" You know, how can we have to take a step back here and take a look at what it is that's important here. And I didn't hear the kinds of questions being asked about growth management, preserving our air and water quality, transportation issues. And so I decided that the best thing to do was to talk to my city council representatives at the time. One of them was not interested in those kinds of issues. And so when her term was nearly over, I went to other friends of mine, other people that I knew in the ward that I respected, and I said, let's do something. We need to have change. We need to be looking at these kinds of issues, tackling them head on. And none of them would take the ball. And they all said, no, I don't think it's my time, but I think you should run and I'll support you. I had never run for anything before. I'd never considered running. I was not looking for another job. I already had a 50 to 60 hour a week job and didn't need anything else to put on my plate. But in the end, I decided that if I cared about these issues, I couldn't sit on the sidelines. I had to pitch my hat in and work for them. And I've been honored to have the opportunity ever since.
Okay. Jamie, how about you? A little background about you and what has prompted your
Gotta stop here. I think that my background as far as politics is zero. In fact, I've had to learn a lot since I've decided to run for city council. As far as my background personally and professionally, most of my professional background has been in photo finishing. And then I raised a family, I'm still raising a family, and recently, I guess in 1993, I founded a construction company that is basically remodeling, makes homes and businesses handicap accessible. And that is really where my heart is. It's always been my passion. So this, whole election thing has definitely created a whole new passion for me. And I was approached by both Republicans and Democrats to come and run, and at that point I didn't have a clue, so I really had to dive in, and these particular people would not tell me what they thought. They said, you go find out for yourself. So I went to Portland. But yeah, it's just been a learning experience for me, and I'm excited.
Okay. What, as you campaign in Ward 2, what issues are people telling you are most important to them? And how do you think you would react to those issues if you were elected to the council?
Annexation is a big one. I've heard a lot about that. A lot of people are concerned. They're being annexed into the city and they feel they're not getting anything for the money that they're paying. And I know that takes time, and I think they do too, but they're concerned about the cost of adding sewer to their home and that kind of thing. And also, I think that there's a lot of people who are not feeling that they're being represented. There's a big majority out there who I feel I've come to realize are feeling neglected.
Okay. Linda, what are the issues that are on top of the voters' minds in Ward 2 as you go door to door?
Well, There are particular neighborhood issues that are very local to the block or the particular neighborhood where someone lives, but by and large I'd say that we have the most diverse ward in terms of land use and in terms of the types of neighborhoods. We have some of the oldest, the original neighborhoods in Missoula, some of the wealthiest neighborhoods, and certainly some of the poorest. One of the critical issues that I'm hearing about are people who are unable to be able to afford to own a home. And yet they're paying as much in rent, or if not more, than I pay in mortgage. So the difference between me as a homeowner and some of the people that I've been talking to is the difference between a down payment, or the difference between having an understanding of what it takes to buy a home, or having an understanding about how to put your own credit history in its best light so that you can actively compete for a loan package to be able to own your own home. People are certainly concerned about growth. What is it going to mean? What about the traffic? People are noticing, specifically on neighborhood streets, traffic, not just the volume of traffic, but the speed of traffic. People are very concerned about speeding cars and children playing and being able to get out into the stream of traffic safely because it is going so fast. We've begun to see opportunities for slowing some of that traffic down in neighborhoods, and more neighborhoods are beginning to take a look at what kinds of things they can begin to do. And I think that one of the critical things that we're going to see in the next 4 years is really the advent of neighborhood councils. In those areas in our community where, and it's typically an issue that has birthed a neighborhood association, we have had quite a lot of input from those neighborhoods. They're able to actively advocate for themselves. And yet in many other parts of our community, there are no such neighborhood organizations as yet. The neighborhood council issue was on the ballot last June, and overwhelmingly people in Missoula said, yes, we want to have neighborhood councils. So I believe that it's been a challenge in some neighborhoods to actively engage people, particularly when they're working 2 jobs, particularly when our meetings are in the evening, televised by MCAT, which is a wonderful, wonderful community resource, but if you don't have cable, it's not a resource that you can have access to. But that I'm hoping that through the neighborhood council opportunity to organize throughout the entire city, specifically in those areas where we do not have neighborhood associations, that we can help not only increase participation in government, but also increase participation in the solutions. Because government's not going to be able to continue to solve problems in the way that we have in the past.
What sort of relationship do you think would be ideal between a neighborhood council and the city council? What do you hope to see develop there?
Well, I see a couple of different things going on there. I believe that a neighborhood council can begin to identify what kinds of issues there exist in a neighborhood. Going door to door is a very time-consuming situation, and we now have 2,500 new homes that will be added to Ward 2 south of the river down to 3rd Street. So the ward has grown tremendously, and it would take you more than the entire summer to get around to every single house and have a meaningful conversation with each person. But at the neighborhood council level, some of those conversations can begin to take place. I'd like to see us be able to take a look at trying to have the neighborhood councils identify what kinds of capital improvement needs they have in their neighborhoods. We tried last year to try to bring the public into the capital improvement program process, and that's where the city puts together a plan for any purchase or any construction that's going to be more than $5,000 that's slated to last more than 5 years. That process didn't work very well, and I think partially our city finance director was ill at the time for an extended period and was not able to fully implement some of the things we wanted to try to do. But I believe you need to have an organization there to receive the information and to begin to have discussions within the neighborhood to prioritize what neighborhood needs are, to communicate those back to the governing body who will make the decisions. And I would like to be able to make decisions for neighborhood capital needs that are based on what the neighborhood specifically wants, not just a few individuals who are very vocal. It's great that we have that level of participation, but if we can broaden the net not only to residential neighbors, but also business neighbors and organizational neighbors that are within that neighborhood council's district, I think that we can get a better balance there, make better decisions.
Jimmy, what are your hopes for neighborhood councils? What kind of potential do you see there?
I think there's a tremendous potential for neighborhood councils. I'd really like to encourage people to get out there and be a part of their neighborhood council, because I've just recently become a part of mine, and I'm learning a lot. I'm seeing that if you don't get out there and get your voice heard, other people are going to speak for you, and you might not like what they have to say. So that's my biggest concern. Also, I'm not quite sure if when we all voted to have neighborhood councils, if we knew we would have to pay for it. So I thought maybe it was, going to be a cooperation of people working together to make the community voice heard. So that's my only concern there.
Okay. What would be your priorities if you were elected to the city council? What would be the things that would be top of your agenda, week in and week out?
I think that my biggest priority, week in, week out, would be to listen and to hear what the people have to say, the majority of the people, definitely. I think that there's so many different things that comes before the city council that it's hard to say where to start. I know growth management is key, and I have some concerns and some excitement about what's happening in Missoula. And also, I think that looking into the way that we are going to develop and planning for that is probably the most important thing right now.
Okay. Linda, what have been your priorities on the council? I mean, do you see those changing if you get another term?
Well, I went back and found the old examples of my campaign literature to take a look to see how I had done. 4 years ago, I had promised that I would work to try to protect what we treasure about Missoula. And so we initiated an open space bond. I think what a lot of people don't realize when they hear the words open space bond is that it's more than just the views and vistas that have been the two first purchases, but it's also parks and playing fields that are badly needed, particularly in Ward 2. We do not have enough playing fields for our community, and in Ward 2, south of the river, there are no parks whatsoever. So I believe that we need to continue to look at the remaining bond money and see how we can best use that to leverage that toward neighborhood parks and more regional parks, as well as the playing fields that we need. I think, however, the biggest single issue, though, is growth. And growth fuels everything. Growth is what makes us realize that the open land that we now have that does not have building on it, that may be a children's playfield that's become an ad hoc children's playfield in the neighborhood, could any day be turned into a new home or a new subdivision or a new business. That we need to be able to identify what we need to protect, what we want to protect, and for what purpose, and then to work collaboratively with landowners. We need to be able to plan for how we're going to grow, how we're going to build neighborhoods where people want to stay, where we have a sense of community that is built within the neighborhood and strengthens the fabric of our community citywide and in this region. So our next steps, and we've worked for the last 3.5 years toward this goal, are to work to change or update our comprehensive plan, to update our subdivision regulations and our zoning regulations. They, at this point, don't serve us well in terms of trying to make change. As I go door to door, people point out to me the building that's been built across the street that's really awful, that might be an apartment building with no windows facing the street, and say, how did that happen? It's because our zoning says this is what you should build. We need to change, we need to modify our zoning to say, no, this is what we need to have in Missoula. We need to look back at some of the old ways of doing things in the university neighborhood or the other neighborhoods where we have identified places that we like, places that might have tree-lined boulevards, might have front porches, but certainly have a presence of face on the street, ways for people to interact, ways for neighbors to get to know each other, but still have their privacy and their own separate lives. So the challenge, I think, is to begin to implement the growth management tools that we are just now in the process of beginning to adopt.
Okay, let's talk about that for a little bit. As you point out, we're at a critical point now in rolling out some of those growth management tools. And you've been watching the growth management task force for the years it's been in operation.
And participating in it.
Indeed. Are we going about growth management the right way? What are Are there bets we're missing, or?
Oh, hindsight is always 20/20. So I think there are many people who wish we had begun this process a good 5 or 10 years ago. But perhaps the motivation wasn't there. The critical need perhaps wasn't as strong then. It's been a challenge because it's been an attempt to do something in a consensual way, to involve the 3 county commissioners, 3 city councilors, plus an alternate, the mayor, a representative from the Chamber of Commerce and from the Neighborhood Network. And we don't always see eye to eye, but the challenge has been to recognize that we all live here in this community. We all have the best interests of the community at heart, but we may have different ways of approaching those best interests. And the process has been one that has gone forward in a very slow manner because we have tried to include those voices at the table along the way.
Okay. How about you, Jamie? What is your assessment of the city and the county's growth management attempts? Are we going about it the right way? Do you have concerns about how the process has gone, or some of the tools that are being rolled out for public inspection now?
No, I think that the growth task management, for whatever that is, that committee is doing a really good job. I think that it's going to be the point where the public has to make a choice, and that's where I think everybody needs to be aware that there's coming up public hearings about the delineated urban service area. And like I said, I went to Portland and I talked to people who had a service area put in place 20 years ago. And I went to 8 different neighborhoods in Portland, and I made a point to talk to at least 5 people in each neighborhood. And I got the most unbelievable responses. I walked up to one man's house. He was on a lot about the size of my lot. And I just walked up to him with my clipboard. I was going to ask him a few questions, and at that point I had no clue what a DUSA was. And he yelled at me. He said, "I'm not selling my lot." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to ask you to sell your lot." And he says, "Well, people come up to me, 3-4 times a month and ask me to sell my lot." He says, "I'm not gonna." He said, "My kids will not be able to afford to live in this city if I don't save this land for them." And there was signs all over the neighborhoods that said, "We'll pay cash for lots." And it's in the statistics show that the property values have gone skyrocket in Portland. Unbelievable, the way that the property values have gone up there. And so that's a big concern. I'm real concerned about seeing that service line. And
So, concerns to the point that you would vote against a urban service area?
at this point, yeah, I definitely would. I think I would probably definitely need to have some more information because I'm very new to this whole process. But at this point, yeah, I went to Portland. I talked to the people.
Okay, well, that seems specific enough. I want to come back to you and ask specifically, I guess, about a designated urban service area. What do you see are the pros and cons, and where are you now on the issue?
Many people don't realize that we already have one. We've had one since 1990. With this comprehensive plan update, what we're looking to do is to be more specific about what it means and to extend its boundaries somewhat. The idea behind it is to make sure that we identify where Missoula is, where it begins and ends, and where Lolo begins and ends, and that there's a definite Lolo there. You know when you get into Lolo, you know when you're leaving Lolo, you know when you get into Missoula. And that there's not this kind of sprawl that just connects all of our towns, all the way up from Hamilton, all the way up into the Lake and Flathead counties. One of the critical needs for looking at, one of the critical motivations for looking at a designated service area is that we can no longer afford to provide services in the way that we've provided them in the past. We cannot afford to provide services to sprawled development that cost more than the taxes that we receive from that development. Sewering is a very expensive proposition, and that certainly is on most people's minds in the areas that are unsewered, particularly in that area between Russell and Reserve Street, as people are contemplating what that means. But a designated service urban area boundary will tell us where we want to sewer, where we want to have urban or suburban level development, and where we do not, where we want to preserve agricultural lands, where we want to preserve the rural character outside of the city, so that we don't just become this sprawled out place so that we identify where we're going to provide services and what level of services we will provide. It takes a long time. You need a lot of upfront planning to plan where the sewer will go, and we're in that process now of identifying how to upgrade and update and how to handle our next generation of wastewater treatment needs. And those kinds of decisions make the influence growth, influence development, and growth as developed or influenced through the way sewer is placed in our community. Okay. So the DUSA will help us, the Designated Urban Service Area will help us identify where we want to grow and become a city and where we do not.
Okay. Let me turn to you first for a fresh question, Jamie. How would you assess the performance of the City Council now as you see it? Where does it do well? Where are the areas you think it could improve? And how would you work to make those areas better if you were elected to the council?
I think that this election is really key to that. What I see on the City Council right now is a majority, and there's some things that are happening that our tax dollars are being used for that, like I said, are not representing the majority of people in Missoula, and that concerns me. And so that, and also people being able to work together, and rather there being two sides to every issue, let it be a whole, and everybody work together to make common sense decisions rather than decisions that might be based on an agenda or what a personal person might think is best. But look at the whole of Missoula and the people who are paying the taxes, and go from there. So that would be something that I think will be solved with this election, I hope. I hope to see whatever ward it happens in, we need more balance, definitely.
Okay. Over to you, Linda. How would you assess the performance of the council? What does it do well? What doesn't do so well? What needs to get better?
I see this council as one that's been in transition. It's been a council that, when I was considering running for council, I talked to every member of the then seated council, and for the most part, people were telling me it was a 6 to 8 hour, possibly 10-hour a week job. It is not that way any longer. It's more of a 20-hour a week to 30, depending on what's happening. But the challenge has been to go from a city council that used to look at every single photocopier maintenance agreement individually to a council that is beginning to make more policy decisions. And I believe that that's what the council's role is to make policy decisions, to determine what is the future direction of our community and what is it that we need to do to marshal the resources and to steward our resources well toward those ends. I think that that's been the biggest challenge as we go forward. We're still doing the day-to-day work as we make the transition to saying, staff, we want you to do X, Y, and Z when making purchasing decisions, and if you do that, then we'll give the mayor the authority to sign off on purchases that are up to X dollar amount so that they don't individually have to come to the council every single time. I think one of the challenges is to bring together the really diverse opinions that come to our council meetings, that each one of us bring to the table. My role has often been one of trying to find the solution to the problem, and to try to bring people together. Last year, during the budget time, the budget had always been very contentious, and I chaired the budget for the first time, and it was a challenge. But the night that the budget was adopted, there were 3 individuals who did not vote for the budget, but they did say that they felt that the process had been fair. They felt that they had been included. They felt that their issues had been well aired and discussed. They had not prevailed, but that they had been heard. And I think that that is what we need to try to work toward. For me, the greatest vote of success or mark of success is when I get a letter from someone who says, I disagree with the vote you took last night, but I want you to know that I felt that you heard what I had to say, listened to what it was, took it into consideration. And I thank you for that. And I think that that's what we have to try to achieve, because none of us bring to the table all-knowingness. We don't know everything. We benefit from the discussion. I think one of the bigger challenges that I'd like to continue tackling if I'm returned to office is to help us be even better at getting those views out on the table without a level of emotion that often accompanies it.
Okay, well, thank you. We are just about out of time. Linda, Tracy, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jamie Carpenter, thank you very much. Ward 2 candidates on the ballot on Tuesday. I'm Mike McInally, editor of the Missoulian. Thanks for watching. Be sure to vote on Tuesday.
Please.